Hello again. I just very briefly, would like to revisit yesterday's again. And yesterday, what we did, if I can just pull it up, I've actually just moved it into a 7 folder. But yesterday, what we did was we created this book sample, and in the book sample, if I just show you Android, for example, all it did was it made a JSON call to Google Books API, and then when it had made that JSON call, it displayed a list on screen, and we spent some time designing it nicely and putting it together. And so you can see that if we type in Android, oops, I haven't got a hardware keyboard. If we type in Android, then what we get back is we get a list of books about Android. However, one of the things that we discovered and saw when we were doing this was just that, particularly in Android and iOS, where we had this continuous binding, every time we made a change, we made a network call, and that was a bit too responsive, a bit too fast in terms of the way it was doing things. So I'd just like to go back and show how we'd fix that and fix that across all of the platforms at the same time. So if we come out of debugging, Shift F5, then let's take a look at our books.core ViewModel and take a look at how we might fix it. So you can see here that we have got a very simple ViewModel. It's just got the search term for the string and the results for the list of results. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it, currently what it's doing is when there is a, let me just put this onto different lines so it's easier to see. When there is a change in search term, then immediately it requests an update. And what I'd like to do is just make that a bit less immediate. And obviously, because it's in this shared code, it's going to happen across the platform all the time. So let's just improve this UI a little bit. And the first thing I'd like to do, this UX, user experience, the first thing I'd like to do is to add a IsLoading flag. So that's going to be a Bool, and it's going to be underscore IsLoading. And so you can see, that's just going to be a simple flag that we're going to use to determine whether or not we're already making a request, so we don't make two simultaneously. And then what I'd also like to do is I would like to add some sort of timer that makes sure that we don't make these calls too often. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a timer. So that's a system.threading.timer, as you can see there, hopefully. Oops, no, it didn't work with the thing. So system.threading.timer. So I'll pull that in, underscore timer. And what I'll do is I will initialize that. So it's going to basically, I'll leave it there. And what I'll do is I'll just set that timer up every single time that we have a need to request a new update. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of calling update within search term, I'm going to call schedule update. And what schedule update does is it's going to, first of all, it's going to see whether or not there's a timer. And because we're in multi-threaded land, let's lock this. And it's a bit naughty to lock this. You should really lock a lock object, but let's do it properly. Let's do it. So we'll have a lock object for our view model, private read-only object underscore lock object equals new object. Okay, so this is purely there for multi-threaded synchronization. And so what I'm going to do is so I'm going to lock object, right. And then what I can do is I can check my timer. So if the timer is not null, then I'm going to create one. Timer. And for this we need a callback. So I'm going to just let ReadSharper create one for me. So I'm going to call it timer tick. On timer tick would be a good name for a callback. On timer tick. State I'm not going to need anything for, so I'm going to pass null. And then it's asking me for the time span for when it's going to be due and the time span for its period. So I think for this I'm just going to do time span dot from, oops, again I need to pull it in, from second. So it's just going to tick once a second because that's plenty for most typing. 2, and the period, I'm going to actually just leave that as timespan dot, well, I'll leave it as 0, which I believe means it won't get called twice, but again we're going to delete it anyway, so that's okay. And I'll create the method on timer tick, that's it. And that's all I need to do there. Otherwise, if the timer is null, it already exists, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do timer.change, and again I'm just going to reset it. So really I should probably pull these guys out into some sort of, you know, read-only constants or something, or read-only static members because they're time spans, so you can't do them as constants. But I'm just going to do the same thing. So basically, if we if the user is still typing and you can hear them typing away, then we will push it back by a second. So we're just going to do that. Except I've got my null check the wrong way around. Let me do it. And there we go. So now we've got a timer. It's going to have a timer tick, which I'll push down to here. And then it's going to have update, which we're not currently calling. So what do we do now in onTimerTick? So in onTimerTick, again, we're going to lock our lock object just for safety. And what we're going to do is we are going to dispose of our timer so that it stops ticking. We're going to set it to null, and then we're going to call our old update. Yeah, and within update, what we're going to do is we're going to set the IsLoading equal to true, and then we're going to make some changes to these kind of inline methods, so that not only do we set the and in fact that's obviously should be IsLoading, so that, you know, not just the private field but the whole property, so that we do fire our events. So I'm going to set the IsLoading equal false in each of the success and error handlers, and at that point I should be finished. So just to recap on what I've done, hopefully I've got this right. I've added a sync object just so I can do multi-threading and not worry too much about what's going wrong. I've added a timer, which is something I'm going to create and destroy dynamically when I need to. And so you can see what I do is that I've then replaced, well, instead of calling update, I'm calling schedule update. And in the schedule update, I'm creating a timer if I don't have one. And if I do have one, then I'm changing the timer to push it back a bit. And then the final thing I'm doing is in my timer tick, I'm getting rid of the timer if it already exists. And then I'm calling update. And using IsLoading in there so that I can display something on the screen. So hopefully I didn't make any mistakes in that. Going to build it. There are other ways to do this. You could just always have a timer ticking, and then you could, you know, just check whether or not date time's expired since the last update. But this is one way that I've put in here. Right, so that's books.core hopefully built. Let's go straight back to our Droid example, because that's first in the alphabet here. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to now update the UI to work with what we've got. Now, one thing we'd like to do is display some kind of IsLoading indication. And to do that, we need to use something called visibility. And visibility is obviously not a cross-platform concept, because visibility in Droid is a different set of constants or enums to visibility in Windows Phone. It's different again to Windows Store. And in iOS, there really isn't a visibility, so we kind of had to invent one. What iOS has is the reverse, which is hidden as a Boolean flag. So let's get on with this. And what we need to do to use visibility is we need to go to NuGet, and we need to look up MvvmCross Visibility. Let's see what that pulls back. And you can see one of the things it pulls back is the visibility plugin. So let's do it. So it installs it. And what we should now be able to do, if we take a look at this, is we should, in the layout, for our view, first view, okay, we're going into this Form Designer. What we should be able to do is we should be able to go to the toolbox, and somewhere in here we should find a progress. And let's choose a large one, and let's just drag it into here, and you can see it there. But But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the source, and rather than having it display above the list, oh no, that's okay, I'm going to have it display above the list. It's going to shift things down, but it'll be alright. There are other ways you might want to display it, but this for now should be fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Android, I'm going to bind the visibility of this guy. So to do that, what I do is local mvxbind equals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind its visibility, and this is going to be visible to IsLoading. But what we want is we would like it to be visible when IsLoading is true. So to do that, we need to add a converter, which we covered I think in n=4. And because we've got the plugin, these converters hopefully will just appear for us. If they don't, I'll have to do some tweaking. But the plugin for just straightforward visibility is called Visibility. So that kind of does Boolean too, and it does string. So if a string is not null and not empty, it'll do it. And it'll also do it on a complex object. It'll just test whether it's null. If you want the other way around, there's an inverted visibility, and if you want some custom behavior, there's some base classes to inherit from. So that's what we're doing. We're doing visibility and visibility. And so now I think, is there anything else I need to do? I can't think of anything else that I really need to do. So at this point, I should hopefully be able to run this guy up. Let's see. See what I've messed up. So it's off and building. Packaging application, so it's ready to go. Copying application. Right, so now when we go here and I start typing Android, hopefully you'll see it's not doing any hits, but after a little while it does, and then it comes back with those answers. And again, if I start typing, you'll notice it doesn't do anything particularly too fast. It doesn't do two at the same time. It waits for a second and then it does it. Looking at it, perhaps a second is too aggressive. Perhaps 2 or 3 seconds would even work. So there you go. That's how we got a bit better performance and also some feedback to the UI about what is going on. And then if I actually just use mono, I've got to keep going, otherwise I won't beat the 1 second. But now type mono touch, we wait, and eventually it comes back. Obviously the styling is a bit large on that, so you could easily change that. Instead of progress bar style large, maybe you should use medium. Let's just see if that even makes it better. You could just do it if you wanted to say, right, what I'd like to do is hide my list during the I don't know if this is large enough text for you. If you'd like to have hidden your list during the search, you could do that as well. So then you'd go visibility for the list view, and this is, I guess, is the first time we've seen multiple bindings. You can see it here. All we do is use a semicolon. So visibility of the list view, we want it to be bound to IsLoading, but what we'd like is inverted visibility. So we just use that as the converter. And similarly, what we could do if we wanted to is, I think, search term we could actually disable. So let's do that. I think I'll have to check whether I got the right term. Let me do this by, this is the way I find out about properties normally. I'll go to a class and I'll type something like, so this is an android.widgets.textView .edit text e, and e dot, I think there's an enabled, yeah, so there's an enabled property. Yeah, there are also other properties here you can see, like drawing time and formatted error and all sorts of other things you could do. Freezes text. You can bind to anything that's a getSet property, but the one that I want to bind to is e.enabled, so that's what I'm going to do. So back here I can do, back in my edit text here in the XML, enabled I'd like to bind to IsLoading, but actually I'd like to bind it to the inverse. So to do that, what I'd have to do is do a converter equals inverse Bool converter, and to set up the inverse Bool converter, what I'd have to do is I'd have to go to the core project, I'd have to create a folder, I'd call this value converters, and in value converters I'd create a class. This is going to be called the inverse Bool value converter. The inverse Bool value converter I would inherit from So this is going to be going from a bool to a bool. So it's an MVX value converter. Which again, I use ReSharper to pull in the right namespace. And this is bool bool. And what I'd like to do is I'd just like to override the convert, and I'm just going to return not bool value. Oh, I don't even need the bool because it's going to do that for me. So that's my inverse bool. And if you've watched the part 4 of this N+1 series, you'll know all about these value converters. Just because they're declared there, it's going to be picked up by default in Droid and Touch. So we should now be able to run this guy. And unless I've got something wrong, which I don't think I have, hear that, then we should be able to come back here. Did I hit run? No, it's saying that there's a... okay, so I picked a style called medium, and there doesn't exist a style called medium. I'm just going to get rid of the style altogether. I know. So I'll call it... So what I'll do is I'll leave it at large. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually set its width and height to 100 dp. 100 dp. So dp's are device independent pixels, so I can't even remember how many inches that is, but that's what it's going to do. So if we now start this up, hopefully that will now build and deploy. And hopefully what we'll see is we get our control exactly as we expect. And then when I type Xamarin, okay, so I paused, you can see it disabled it, you can see this is now visible, and you can see that the list, hopefully when I start typing again and do that, you'll see that the list disappears during it. So all of my settings are now up and running correctly. I think there's one more thing that I probably should do. Which is that my list view itself here is using the small thumbnail, and as we saw on iOS yesterday, we should really just use the thumbnail for that. So that's my last change I'm going to make. Oops, debugger connection lost, but I did hit Shift F5, so that's not too surprising. So if I come back and do debug start again, and hopefully waiting for device. May have lost my debugger, in which case I may move on from this demo. Okay, so actually this is probably quite useful for people anyway. So when you get to debugger problems, then what you do is you open up a new command prompt. And so this is a new spec one I have here. Let me just open up a new one. And what you do is you cd to program files x86 /Android / it depends where your Android SDK is. If you've installed it using the Xamarin tools, it quite often goes into a horrible user folder, but find out where your Android SDK is and then zoom into there. So all I'm doing is going to the directory where my Android SDK is, and then when you're in there, there's a directory called, there's one directory called platform tools, and there's one directory called tools. I think I need to go to platform tools. And then I think in there's a script called ADB. Right, so ADB is the Android debugger bridge, and you can see if you just type it, you get all sorts of info back. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to find out a bit more about this. So what we're going to do is type ADB. Let me change the font size for you. Properties, font. Large cursor size, font. Okay, that seems to be as large as I can go. So all I'm doing is type ADB and then devices. Oops, I typed devices wrong. So ADB and devices. And then it'll tell you what's attached. Now in this case, it seems like the problem isn't in my ADB. It seems like the problem might be in my Visual Studio. But what you quite often find you do is you need to stop and start the server. So to do that, you type ADB kill server, Yeah, and then you get errors over here because you've killed the server halfway through something. And then what you can do is you can either start it up using start server like that, or if you just type ADB devices again, then it will actually start the server because it's looking for them. And what it should do is it comes back and it says here is your thing. It says offline, which is a bit worrying. Let me just do that again. Yeah, so we'd have to see whether or not it's actually going to work when I need to debug. So let's try debug start new. Refresh. Yeah, so it looks like there's a problem in my emulator. So at this stage, what I'd probably do is I'd come to my Android emulator and I'd shut it down. And because I'm using the Intel one, and after it's shut down, it only takes, half a minute rather than an hour to start up again. So I hit OK, it starts up. Hopefully we'd see that over on our command line, it's telling us things are offline, but hopefully ADB itself has an awful lot of really useful options in it. I don't tend to use it that much because I'm not really a command line person, but you can see you can shell into basically the Unix core, and you can do all sorts of things. And there's some really useful like socket connections. Is basically what the debugger uses under the hood. It's really good, and this works for real devices as well as for emulators. Right, so our emulator's up. Let me see. So now I've got it in the list of devices, so I can hit OK. And I think all I changed was the thumbnail and possibly some sizing is all I've changed. So this should just work. And this has taken probably 10-15 minutes to improve from the previous version. But this is actually what development is quite like in terms of real monodroid Xamarin.Android development. It's a lot about actually just improving the UI, improving incrementally improving the views. So you can see there is our list with all of our favorite authors listed up there. I'm not sure how they sorted out the order of these guys. I think, I'd put Craig higher up, Chris higher up, or I'm going to make enemies here. Wally, in fact no, they'd all have been on the first line. Wally, the whole lot of them would have been on the first line. Before I get in any more trouble. Okay, so that's Android finished. Let's try and do the same sort of changes within the other platforms. So next up in the alphabet is just coming over here. So Windows Phone is next up in the alphabet. So to do this, we want to use the same things, but Windows Phone, as we know, had the problem. Let me just show you. The Windows Phone has this behavior, should we call it, that with text box they don't actually update on the fly. They only update when you tab away. So if we type in here Windows Phone, then nothing happens at all until you tab away, and then we don't get any updates for a second, and then we actually go off and do it. So let's add some better behavior to this Windows Phone application to make it more like our Android one. So the first thing I'd like to do is solve that problem that we don't get incremental updates with Windows Phone, and to do that I'm going to pull in another NuGet package, and this one is going to be coding for fun because I happen to know that's got some useful behavior for me. And coding for fun controls, I need coding for fun for Windows Phone, so let me just type in coding for fun and phone. Not sure which one I've got there. And it looks like controls might be the one that I'm looking for, so I'm just going to do that. Obviously, you probably want to look it up more accurately. And then once I've done that, what I can do is in first view, I can load up my XAML. I don't mind about the designer too much. And what coding for fun includes is, not sure what that is. What coding for fun includes is that in your text box you can actually attach a property. So let me just check I don't have anything that's too embarrassing up on the screen. If I go for coding for fun on Codeplex, then you'll see one of the things that they talk about here, and it's kind of one of their main things, is that you can do this local text binding update source on change. So I'm just going to do that, and I will do that as an attached property here, and you can see that ReSharper immediately says you've done it. So I've pulled it up, And that should now give us our instant changes. So let's just prove that works. Oops, wrong emulator. So now what we should see is that when we start typing, obviously we're going to have this second delay, so I'm going to have to prove it's working. But you can see hopefully that we're getting a lot more hits through than we would if we didn't have this coming through. It's not waiting for us to tab away. So there's our first change. But we'd also like to do some of that enabling and disabling. And to do that, we're going to have to make it into. We're going to have to take that value converter from before. I think you can remember that guy. Which value converter was it? It was the visibility one. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull it in. So let's go to our books.phone and let's go to NuGet and let's go to MvvmCross and Visibility and pull it in. You can do it yourself if you don't want to use the visibility plugin, but visibility it just is there for you, so why not use it? And then I think, let me just check that we can actually just add this. I may have misremembered. So I believe that in the resources for the page, we can add a MVX native visibility converter. It'll be a visibility value converter. Let me see if it's... No. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it here. So add into C# value converters. And this is because we don't have the native value converters. It's not a portable class according to Microsoft, so we have to do it this way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a folder called native a class called converters, and in this file what we'll actually do is we'll do a public class, and this is going to be this is a visibility converter, so we're going to call it native visibility converter, and this is just going to inherit from an NVX native native value converter. I apologize for this boilerplate code, but it's what we have to do for these. And this is going to be an MVX. I think it's got a native visibility value converter. Let's see if it pulls that up. I must just have the wrong name. Let me see. Maybe it's just MVX value. That's it. It's not a native one. So at that stage, hopefully, I don't know why the syntax highlighting is not working. Perhaps it just needs a refresh. No, it still doesn't want to work. So at that stage, hopefully, all we've got is we've got this native visibility converter, and we can use that here in our resources. And obviously, it's suggesting where to pull it in from. And we'll just give that a key equal to visibility. And then once we've done that, we can actually use it. So let's do that. So what do we want to be visible? Well, we would like this progress bar that we haven't actually done yet. So let's add it. So we're going to add I think it's I have to remember all of these things. Is it a progress bar or an indeterminate? Let's try progress bar. Okay, so it's an indeterminate progress bar. And what we do is we put its visibility equal to binding. So this is a bit fiddly, sorry. IsLoading, comma, converter equals static resource. Now there is some debate, should we say, about whether or not you should use the isIndeterminate progress bar, because certainly in the very early Windows Phone it was very inefficient, but hopefully that has now disappeared. So I'll have to check whether that's the case, but I think this is safe to use. So let's now see whether or not this works. Probably should have checked some of this before I started, but sorry. So now if we start typing Windows Phone, and you can see there's the progress bar. I need to position it better, so let me do that. So we've just got some positioning to work out here. Right, where have I put this? So this progress bar at the moment is at the it's in this grid, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use it across the middle of that grid is what I'd quite like to do. So I'll leave it where it was, and what I'll do is I'll do grid.crowspan equals 2, and then what I'd like to do is I'd like to hide the list as well. So to do that, we're going to have to pull in the inverted value converter. So back into this native value converters area, let's pull in the inverted as well. So this is going to be inverted, but native inverted value visibility converter, and we just pull it in like that. And I believe I shouldn't have to do this. I think there's a shortcut, but yeah, it's good exercise to show you how it's done anyway. So we pull in the native inverted visibility converter, and we're going to then use it again. We have to pull it into the XML as well, so it's a static resource. Value converters, native inverted, and this is going to be x:\key equals native. No, sorry, this is equals inverted visibility. You know, this is fiddly, but it's not too bad to do. And what we do is we pull this in, and so we just like to set the visibility. We'll copy it from there, and we're going to add it to our list box. And so our list box, and add the word inverted. So now what we see is our list box is going to be visible only when IsLoading is false. So let's just see if that works as well. So we bind it up, and now what we should happen is if we start typing Windows phone, then I hope it looks like we may have a I can't actually see our progress bar, so let me set that to a, normally you'd set this to like to be the color of the accent color on the phone, but for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the foreground equal to, and I'll call it red, because that should be, try orange, that should be pretty easy to see on the phone, on the demo. So let me just show that. I could do the slow network now just so you can actually see this working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type Windows Phone, and then hopefully you can see there it came along, and then you get this back, and again I recognize lots of the author names here from people who've written things, and you can see there is our list or Windows Phone books. And again, we should probably, these look a bit patchy, these icons, we should probably be using the larger thumbnail. So that's the last change I'm going to make to Windows Phone, because I think we've spent long enough on it. And just to recap, what we've done so far is we used coding for fun. We just pulled it in from NuGet in order to get that attached property. And then let me just see what comes up if you type MvvmCross. Does anything come up? The answer is, oh, a few things come up. I've no idea what they're about. But what we've done so far is we've used an attached property to get more instant update on this guy. And then we've added that kind of progress bar to give some user feedback. We've added these visibility converters so that we can show and hide things when IsLoading has happened. And that's it. You know, it didn't take long to get a better performance. I think one thing we didn't do, so go on, there's one more thing, is we can also get a native converter for that Boolean. So there was a public class native inverted Bool converter, MvvmCross native value converter, and this is inverted Bool converter. I think it's a value converter. So this is the guy that I'm hoping to pull in from our core, and it was an inverse Bool. just get the names consistent. Yeah, so we're just pulling in that custom value converter, which just did, you know, an inverse on the Bool, this guy. And we're going to pull this in, and we're going to use it. So again, here in the static resources, we do value converters, native inverse bool, x:key equals inverse bool. And then what we should be able to do for this is we should be able to set the enabled again on the text box. So let's do it. And this should stop us getting any updates during our updates anyway. So so this is enabled. IsEnabled is the property, and this is going to be binding to IsLoading. But we're applying a converter, and the converter is static resource inverse bool. So now we should get the final piece of this foam puzzle to make it match the Droid experience. Debug start new. And we should get that if we now start typing that are a bit slow, so if we start typing Windows F and then get a bit slow, then when it starts loading up, then actually during that load up, oh, have I done something wrong? During that is loading, oh, I think I may have upset it. Okay, so you can't just do that because something has gone very wrong there. I presume that somehow this is an interaction between that converter and the IsEnabled and the actually I don't know what it is, but I presume it's some kind of reaction between the IsEnabled and the that attached property. It looks like it's just looping now, so it looks like it didn't come out. Let me try that again. Here's loading inverse bool. I don't know what that is. That's quite interesting. You just see. So we load it up, and if we then do Windows, yeah, so it doesn't like that. So you have to be a bit careful here, obviously. I wish I hadn't gone into this part of the demo, but there's obviously something going on there that means that it's not doing its, you know, this inverse bool is somehow fighting with this update source on change, and we'll have to work out what that is, and we'll have to work out some other way of doing this so that the updates happen. So yeah, that's all part of UI development. I'm going to remove the IsEnabled because it clearly isn't very happy. You could do other ways around it, but that's, you know, we'll need to look at what that is. There you go. Yeah, that's genuine UI development, and I wish I hadn't done that last step. So now let's take a look. I'm not going to take a look at store because I think I spent long enough on this and it's quite an easy exercise. You'd have to do the same sort of things in the XAML for Windows Store, but I will look at touch, and this is the version of touch that includes the zib. So let me just check that this is still running. So I set a startup project, and then I'm going to set it to iPhone simulator, and then I'm going to find over here the toolbar to set it to Retina 6.1, and I'm just gonna make sure my Mac is alive. Just logging in. So I'll need to set my Mac alive, and then I need to start debugging. To do this I need type VNC viewer up again, and again I'll have to connect, and there'll be a password to enter. And then hopefully I should be able to get over to type VNC, and here's my Mac coming up. Looking at the screen, it's not actually started yet, so let's see what's happening. Okay, so it has now started over on the Mac. Sorry about this while I get all set up. So the one we've got in, here's our simulator. You can see it's not that pretty a UI. If we start typing, we get mono touch. So we're getting the behavior for free from that timer already, and you'll see that hopefully it'll now start doing its hit, but you're not getting much visual feedback about what's happened, and there you go, there we get our hits come back. Okay, so we need to update this somehow, because I think I may have not saved the right version, so let me just take a look. So in our first view, we've got a simple one. Yeah, so that shouldn't have done what it just did, but what I guess it's just a building problem. What I'll do is I'll uninstall it from the simulator. Uninstall these guys. Delete. Delete. You might have got a bit confused about what's installed. And here what I'll do is, it looks like it should be loading the right one, so hopefully that will be alright when I redo it. What I'm going to do is, we've got a few things we'd like to sort out. So the first thing we'd like to do is we would like to add some kind of progress or spinner to the screen. And to do that, what I'm going to do is, you could use a heads-up display, and I think SCOS has a really good heads-up display, and I think also Nick Wise Fast Chicken has put one on the component store, but I'm going to do it the hacky way to start with, and that is a var new UI activity indicator view. And what I'll do is I will put this, where shall I put it? I'm going to put it bang in the middle of the screen. So we'll put this at like so 140, 130, and we'll put it 130 down as well. That sounds good to me. And then we'll give it widths of 60, 60. Obviously we have to remember to add that to the screen. And what we'd like to do is we would like to have that visibility bound. So to get visibility, what we'll do is we'll go to new get packages, and not too surprising to anyone, we will get MvvmCross Visibility and install it as a plugin. And then what we should be able to do is we should be able to set .bind, and what we'd like to bind is we'd like to bind our activity. Yeah, and what property we're going to bind on that, so this is a bit different to what you normally see, is we're going to bind its visibility. So let's just see, so it hasn't really gotten a visibility, so what we're going to bind is we are going to bind using a string called visibility. Yeah, so it hasn't actually got a real property called visibility, but we've got a pseudo one we're going to add in, and we're going to bind that to the ViewModel vm.IsLoading. And hopefully we're going to use a converter, so we're going to do with conversion, and we'll just pass in the name of the converter, and the converter is visibility, capital V, and semicolon. And we should at that stage also consider that we'd like to hide the table view, so let's do that as well. So the table view, we're going to get its visibility, we're going to bind it to IsLoading, but we're going to bind it using the inverted visibility. So let's see if that helps at all. I'm going to rebuild, because I wasn't sure that it actually, I'm going to rebuild the core. No, it must pick up the core, okay. And I'm going to see whether or not I can get this running on the Mac. Debug start new. So off it's going, and hopefully it's building. It claims to be running, so hopefully we'll see it deployed here soon. Just waiting to see. Okay, so it installed, came across. Now let's see, if we start typing mono touch and then pause, then hopefully we should, unless I've got some things very wrong. Okay, we're definitely not picking up the right version. Right, so at this stage we're actually hitting bugs in mono inside the Mac. So what it's not doing is it's not picking up the latest build. So to work around that, there are ways you can uninstall it and all sorts of other things, but to work around it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an application name to give it a different target to build to, and hopefully it'll use this. So this is going to be com.mvvmcross.books, and this is going to be version 2, and I hope that's going to trick my my Xamarin install into thinking it's a new version. If not, you may see me dive over to the Mac in a moment and get a new one out. So here we build. So it claims it's going to build it. Please go to a new place. I don't think it's picking up the changes. Okay, so I'm still not succeeding, but I don't give up that easily. So let's see what else we can do with this. Are there any other settings I can change? What I can change is the assembly name. I'm wondering, so I'm going to change that to Books Touch, and I'm wondering if there's anything else I can do to try and trick this guy into behaving. Let me just try that one change. Eventually it'll go over, and if not, then I'll have to try and delete some things from the Mac. This is mainly because I've copied a solution across, and so it's just picking up the old one. Let's see what happens. It definitely picked up the new name. Right, so now it definitely looks different. So you have to change the assembly name, by the way, by the looks of it, to get that to go. And what I'll do is mono touch, type it in, and then do we see, okay, so we don't see the progress bar at the moment, so I need to work out what that is. But you can see that we've got, you know, our display correct now, and you can see also that it's definitely not doing too many hits. It kind of waits for a second and then does them. So let's see what else we've got here. So we're saying that at the moment we've got some binding errors, and you can see these things. So it's saying that it couldn't bind to visibility, and it's saying that the system boolean to system.byte can't work. So let's take a look. From IsLoading to visibility. Is there anything else that it's saying in these errors? Okay, so it's saying it could not find converter called visibility, and it looks like the reason for that is simply, and quite honestly, is just a typo. So let's just go back to here, and if we zoom in, then what you'll hopefully see is that I have failed to spell the word visibility correctly. So if I spell that correctly, do we then get the behavior that we were kind of hoping for? So now back in the virtual desktop, just waiting for it to deploy and build. And now if we start typing up here, then hopefully we see that something disappears. We can't see our update, so there's something else we want to do, and what we want to do probably is let's just shift F5 to come out of there. Let's just give our activity some properties. So activity dot is animating, we're going to give a property to true, and you could bind is animating as well if you wanted to. Is animating not one of those? Okay, so it's not one of those properties. Animator dot let me try setting its color. See whether or not it's that. And so this is going to be equals UI color dot, well, let's set it to a red, to an orange again if we can, and let's see if that helps at all. And this is, you know, normally this wouldn't be such a problem because we'd have used the designer to pull this up anyway, but I'm on the PC, so I can't use the zip designer yet. And let's see what happens. So that should be running, it's waiting to come. And again, hopefully, let's start typing Xamarin. And now you can see our orange animator. So there is our behavior. You could do other things. You could actually animate it so that it kind of comes in and out nicer than that. But I hope you can see, you know, our favorite authors on the screen. I hope you can see that. We could, I think, also enable that, disable the control. So let's see whether or not we can do this. So if we take a look at text field here, then text field has a property of enabled. Yeah. So let's try binding that enabled property. So down here in the bindings, we're going to do set bind and text field. It's already got one binding. We're going to add another one, and this one's going to be for the text field's enabled property. Yeah, and what we're going to bind it to is we're going to bind it to the ViewModel's IsLoading property, and we're going to use a converter, and that converter is the one from our from our main core project, and that one was called Inverse Bool. And so now the text field should only be enabled when we're not loading. And let's just see if that works. Debug start. Just wait for it to fire up the across the network. So here it runs, and now let's see. So if we start typing here Xamarin, then when it starts loading, then we get the same problem, it looks like, as we got with the Windows Phone one. So there's definitely something odd going on with this with conversion inverse bool, and I'm not sure what it is at the moment, but I'm going to remove it. It looks like there's some sort of hideous loop that's going on, and so I'm going to just stop that, and I'll have to come back in a future one to explain why inverse bool doesn't work. I don't know, but hopefully we can get rid of that, and we'll go back to the one which doesn't have that in there. I hope this N+1's been educational, at least, in terms of showing this is what genuine UI development's like. So on each platform you'll come across these little nuances, but each platform you hopefully can get to a similar standard, which feels native, which looks native, which uses native controls, which gives you the sort of functionality you want, but you may have to test each one. So what have I done? How do I come out of this? Go back to my controls. So on each one you should be able to get reasonable results. You should be able to get that spinner up of some description. This one looks like an iOS spinner, the other one looked like a Windows Phone ... and the Android one looks like an Android progress, and on every single platform you should get this working through. So apologies that there were problems and errors during that, but I hope that you see we've now got kind of a UI that has a little bit more finesse to it. Still doesn't look beautiful, but has more finesse to it on iOS. We have a UI on the phone emulator as well that looks a bit more finessed in terms of having progress, etc., and having incremental update. So you can see we get our ... I haven't fixed that one, so you're not going to see anything. And you can see that on Android again, I'll have to run it from the debugger, we've got a bit more finesse. So we've hit problems in each case. Those problems we'll have to come back and solve, but you can see how we build it up. We can use NuGet to improve things. We can also use the component store from Xamarin to add UI controls for Android and iOS, but overall I hope you can see how you can build up better UIs than just the first ones that I've been using. And please don't forget that underneath this, what we did was we added some changes to the core functionality. So we added that timer into the ViewModel, and that timer has really underpinned everything, because that's what's actually given us better performance. Cool, so apologies for problems, but those are genuine development problems, and I hope that's been useful. Okay. Next up, I'm not sure again. Please fire in the feedback about what you want to hear about. Okay, just a quick comeback on the last recording. As you saw at the end of the last recording, I was beginning to pull my hair out, what little hair I have left. And the reason was because when we were running up the samples, we were hitting, the screen was freezing, and I didn't know what was going on. However, as soon as I stopped recording, I kind of realized. So the screen was blocking. If we looked at Windows Phone, let's just run that up. Then what we were seeing was that when we ran this guy up and we started typing in life, then what was happening is the screen was just locking up altogether, and that's obviously not good in any application. And I was like, oh no, what's happening? Is it some interaction between the text and the binding of the is enabled? and it was, but actually it wasn't anything to do with UI. It was to do with my buggy first view model. And the reason was because, as you remember, when we coded up the first view model, we added a lock object. And that lock object is used when we change our search term, because when we change our search term we call schedule update, and we lock there. And one of the things that happens when we schedule that update is we kick off this timer. And when the timer fires, what happens is we call lock again, and within lock we call update, and update drives the UI in various ways, and then the UI comes back in. And so what's happening is we're getting deadlock on this lock object from the UI thread and also from the background thread. So I think there's a really simple fix for that, and I think if we just take that update and put it outside, then we're still safe in terms of our use of the timer. There's a possibility we might get two things through, but we could work that out as well. You know, we could add additional flags and tests, or we could just change the logic slightly. But to start with, let's just pull this update outside of that lock, and then I hope what we should be able to do is if we run up now our phone sample, then I hope we should get fixed functionality. So now if we type mono touch, I shouldn't really type that into Windows Phone, now you can see it disables and we get the right functionality. And now, oops, now if we type Windows Phone, then I hope again you'll see that after that 1 second delay we get the functionality we really wanted. There's some additional flickering there, we'd have to look at what that is, but I hope you can see how that all fits together and is the functionality we'd really expect. Phew. So that's Windows Phone working. Apologies for that. And I think that same fix in the view model, and this again is a good argument for why you use shared code, it's because you only have to fix these multi-threading hideous problems once, is that you can then get this working again. Let me come out of that debugger. We should be able to get this running as well on the Mac, and we should get rid of the problem there. So debug, start new. Take a look. Let me just wait for that to actually. Okay, so it says it's spinning up on the Mac. Hopefully it'll spin up. Right, so it's spun up the simulator. And now if I start typing here, you know, iPhone. Oops, yeah, iPhone. Then you can see now we don't get that problem, and you can see also that we shouldn't be able to edit it. So it's not got much visual clue about the enabled, but that binding's now working. So apologies for the problems in the previous recording, but that's the fix. It was purely a threading bug, purely in my view model, purely in my code, not in the framework or anything. And I hope that's useful. Okay, I will be back, but I just wanted to say what the problem was. It's good to fix these things rather than to leave them hanging. Excellent, thanks.